Hello, welcome to CTV. This is the most wonderful show in the air, and I am Diane Baum, your moderator for my most wonderful panelists that were ever assembled on the face of the earth. Tonight we're going to be talking about addictions. In fact, I've been hearing lately about new models of addiction versus the old models of addiction, and it turns out that the new models aren't all that new. Our title tonight, which is Believe in Absurdities, Ideas About Addiction, comes from a quote by Voltaire. And the quote is, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." And the idea is that you get an idea in your head, whether it's true or not, you're going to follow that idea. The addictions are the behavior that makes you a target and allows us to collectively commit atrocities. What drives the atrocities we are willing to commit? Someone decides and then persuades us what is good and what is bad behavior. Someone decides and then persuades us what society will tolerate and what society will not. Someone decides and then persuades us what we should and should not spend time or spend money on. Someone decides and then persuades us what should and should not motivate us. If you kill your girlfriend, that's understandable. If you kill someone because you don't like their race and lifestyle, we'll throw the book at you. Someone decides and then persuades us which things that grow from the ground or are made in a lab, which treatments or pastimes are or are not legal. Basically, someone makes a fake copy of us and holds it up to us and then persuades us to buy it and to be it. Even worse, men make fake copies of women and women make fake copies of men, and then we each try to be those. And we buy it all and more. And usually the people making these decisions on what we should and should not be doing do it for their personal profit or out of religious zeal, which is often for the profit of those at the top of the religion. Of course, people can't possibly live like this for more than a short time. And that time is getting shorter all the time. And more people are having difficulty just living their lives at younger and younger ages. Then people look for things that will help them avoid it all. They look for some substance that will knock out their good sense, some high they can substitute for living, or some behavior that can become a fake scorecard, useful to show if they are winning or making it. At being the, you like that one, at being the fake copy of themselves that they are supposed to be. People want a surrogate life they can substitute for the life they've abandoned because someone told them to abandon it. If you can get people to abandon their own agency, their own running of their own lives, you can make money off of them. And while people are doing this, no one is addressing the real problems in society. And those problems get worse, and people react even more to the unaddressed problems all around us, and we all get worse. All the while, the mental and physical health industrial corporate complex is treating us for our addictions. And treating us for depression, and treating us for debilitation, and substituting itself for ourselves. And many doctors, not all, many mental health professionals, not all, are making money off of our so-called problems. And lawyers, prisons, the legal system, the drug companies, the street gangs, and on and on. How do you make money off of poor people? What do we need to get them to do? What medicine is the best medicine? The cash register goes cash register goes ka-ching. People often do not trust mental health professionals for themselves. I think it's got the worst rating of any profession. It's way at the bottom.
More than dentists?
More than dentists. But they don't trust mental health professionals for themselves, but they trust them for other people. They want the other person to get treatment. I want my child to get treatment. The judge wants the guy in the courtroom to get treatment. The person wants their neighbor to get treatment. But nobody wants to get treatment themselves for very good reasons. I want to talk about our panel. We are not particularly experts at treatment. We're regular people. All of us are addicts. All of us know addicts. All of us know former addicts. All of us, some of us have even been in recovery programs for addictions. Just like you, we all have experience and have read a lot and heard a lot about addictions. Addictions drive a lot of what's going on in our society, or so-called addictions. But I am going to introduce my panel. This is Annaflora, the beautiful, wonderful Annaflora. This is the brilliant and wise Dave Blakeslee, and this is the fabulous Martha Cooper. And this discussion is to provoke thinking and not to lay down some kind of dogma. We are here to expand your minds, not to close them down by advocating one particular thing that you must accept. You should not be addicted to one version or idea of anything. Okay, that's the rant.
Okay.
And I have some questions for you. I want you to answer these in any order, but in turn. What is addiction, tolerance, and withdrawal? What kind of addictions do people we know have? Are addictions always bad? And is it bad to substitute one addiction for another? So you can take any of those. Annaflora, I'm going to have you start because you represent all the young people of the universe. And then Dave and then the older people that have more limited brains can think longer.
So I really liked in your part about when is something an addiction and when is it not. And I have a shopping addiction. I've had a shopping addiction forever, even forever, ever and ever. And I learned, I was talking to my brother or my uncle, they're money guys, they know a lot about money. And I said, I think I have a shopping addiction. And they said, no, it's not a shopping addiction until you spend more than what's coming in. So that's when I learned that it's not bad until you're spending what you don't have. But I still think of it as an addiction. But they said if you're not, depleting your resources, it doesn't matter how many times a day you go shopping. So I thought that was interesting. And I see that a lot when I have friends that get DUIs. My friends that are poor, it's this huge life moment because they can't afford it.
Right.
And then my friends that are rich, it's like, maybe they'll not buy a latte for a week and they'll pay for the DUI, but it is nothing. And I guess the newest addiction that I've had a problem with and a lot of my friends have had a problem with is texting. Not for, a sexual purpose or anything, it's just texting. And you're always thinking, did I miss a text? Is someone texting me? And the really hard part about it, just like porn addiction, is that you need these devices to continue on with your life. And so, I have this addiction to texting, but I can't get rid of my phone because I need it for work. And it becomes this really hard cycle, just like people need computers for work. But then there's always the, thought of looking at porn.
That's a really good point because, if you have an alcohol addiction or heroin addiction, well, you can just avoid alcohol and heroin, but you can't avoid your phone.
Right.
But I have heard, and I've read about this, of people that were so addicted to texting that when they were in their car, they had to lock their phone in the trunk in order to drive because they couldn't stop looking at their text. Even people that had been in accidents So that's a really important addiction.
And there's a lot of pressure with texting because people know you have their phone on you. So if you don't text back, they get upset and they say, "Why didn't you text me for an hour?"
Right.
And
There's
so,
a message and not
yeah,
texting.
there's a
Right.
consequence, a negative consequence that you feel by trying to step away from your addiction. So it's
Oh.
really difficult.
That's really interesting.
Well, I guess I'll challenge this idea that addiction, I do work in mental health, I do work in treatment, and so to me addiction is a specific term that you're going to use when a problem, a behavior, a compulsion has gotten to the point where it's really disrupting your ability to interact in a productive or stable way. So if it's, you may have habits and you may have tendencies or you may have strong urges to participate in certain activities, but if it's within the context of a fairly well-managed life and it's not, causing, physical or psychological or relationship strains, then I'm not sure I would use the word addiction. Not that I'm uptight about it. I know in kind of casual social talk, I'm addicted to my Starbucks in the morning or whatever. So that's fine. I'm not going to, crack down on people for using that word. But in the sense of what's really going to require treatment, what's going to require some kind of intervention, where do we have to say to this person, buddy, you've got a serious problem here, crashing cars or getting into physical fights or selling your kids video games so that you can go out and score a hit of something. Yeah, that's definitely, you're crossing boundaries, you're betraying your own values, you're letting this impulse, whatever it is, porn, substances, gambling. We could make a long list of those behaviors that just grab us kind of by the heart and soul and pull us, and we wake up in the morning saying, "I'm not going to do that today," and a few hours later, there we are back at it. So it is kind of when does it kind of escalate to the point where other people are saying, "Man, what is up with him or her?" And you yourself know that you're screwing up. And you still can't stop yourself.
So Dave, you agree with your relatives who told you it's not an addiction until
Yeah.
it disrupts your life,
Right.
like the creditors are
That's
coming
the
to take the
textbook
couch.
version, I guess, if
Yeah.
you'd say. Sure.
So,
Even if you're going shopping 3 times a day, if you can afford it, it's okay.
Well, yeah, and
doesn't
there is
disrupt.
some economics and politics
Yeah.
behind what defines addiction, because for some people, their margin of error is so slim that they can get into those heavyweight problems where a person with wealth and social connections can be a much more functional alcoholic, drug addict, or whatever, and they're kind of enabled by the handlers. A lot of our celebrities and entertainers, they have
They've got the
raging
money.
habits, but there's people behind them that say, we're going to keep this person propped up because the
Right.
show must go on.
I had a client once, and they were extremely wealthy, and it was cocaine was the drug of choice in that circumstance, and it was just out of control, and even all the money that they had, and I can't name names, of course, I would never do that, especially when talking about addiction, but they did eventually lose their children. So I personally, and I'll just be up front with that, is that I'm an alcoholic. So I have other addictions, one of which is cigarettes. I'm still smoking, but I'm not still drinking. And when you talked about what alcoholism is, and especially you said some things about when you can't even keep your own word to yourself.
Right.
Then you're talking about how do you negotiate walking around on the planet, making choices about where to be, what to do next, everything. In my addiction before I quit, even my thinking, because I was taking a drug that actually works on your thinking. So now my choices are impaired. I would sit there by myself, okay, and hide my liquor bottle in the sock drawer, which makes no sense. And, my parents keep theirs in a cabinet. So when you're doing things that make absolutely no sense, I sat there and I still had enough awareness to listen to my thinking going, oh my God, am I screwed? I could not drink. I was
Around on yourself,
unable to say I won't lie. Well, because when I drank, my brain was lying to me. How am I not going to lie?
You're
Even to
betraying yourself.
myself.
You're betraying
Oh,
yourself.
I'll never drink and drive. And for a long time it didn't. But then eventually, you know, they say, they got a lot of jokes about it because I think it helps to have a sense of humor, you know, to put yourself back together and to really, you know, take stock of the way you're thinking and what you're doing. I had a really tough time because the last thing I wanted to do was check in. But when I could not get past the liquor store and would walk out crying with a bottle in my hand, I had to do something or I was going to kill somebody. And that somebody very well could have been me. One of the things that, you know, if you're living an unmanageable life and it's just falling apart, depression comes right along with that. Anxiety is just huge because you can't trust yourself. And, you know, it's like, how do you, you know, it's like to manage my anxieties and my fears when I was drinking by taking a pill, because this is an anti-anxiety drug, would have just made chemical soup.
Yeah.
So until I could keep the alcohol out of my system for a while. And I really was just shocked at how compulsive it was. It was just amazing. So I've seen, you know, at a certain point, your brain, when you're giving it a certain drug or a certain behavior maybe even, I know that there are people that are addicted to food. And, you know, it would be, I can't imagine, now I could not have a drink in the morning, I'd be a fine, you know, but to not be able to deal with food. So I think that there's a real need for different treatment models. I think that anything that works has my vote. You know, I've known people in AA that were atheist and they still go to AA and they're still sober. I'd like there to be more available. I know that there was a group that I was very interested in for a while. It was women only, which I kind of was like, yeah, I'm not crazy about that either. But it was Women for Sobriety. And I liked that the ownership of, you know, of what's going on with me and my world and my life. I liked the idea that we are responsible for each other in this group, that we are here to support each other in our endeavors.
Sure.
You know,
I looked that up, Sisters for Sobriety.
Women for Sobriety.
And they really believe in miracles, which that's their thing, is that we believe that anything can happen, that miracles can happen, and it was just, you know, that was their credo, which is really nice.
It's
like
a lot
you don't
easier to
have
believe
to,
in that when you're, I mean, if you're drinking, your ability to use belief, you know, it's like you almost have to have some way to believe that sobriety is possible before you can even take a crack at it.
Okay, well, one of the models that we have is that addiction is, and this is what it feels like to people, which you've been very eloquent about. It feels like you have no choice, that you have to do this. It feels like that. But the science is not behind that. The science is behind this, that addiction is a choice, which is really interesting. The new models of addiction are models of choice and environment, and that's where the science is. When you talk about, but one thing that you said that absolutely the science backs up is that belief really affects your addiction.
Right.
What you believe. And that's why Sisters for Sobriety was such a nice thing to look at, because their belief is anything can happen, miracles can happen. You know, anything, even out of the ordinary, that can happen.
It's the placebo effect, that if you're believing that you're taking this miracle drug, it is a miracle drug.
Placebos work better than a lot of over-the-counter medicines and a lot of prescribed medicines.
So why would they name a book Addiction is a Choice? Like, is that a counter to the idea that addiction is not a choice, that you're helpless, that you're just this, you've been overcome by this chemical process thing, and now you're just like a zombie drawn like a magnet to the substance, to the thing.
That's it.
And I think this is really offensive because when I first saw it, thinking about my issues, I think, how dare they say that?
Correct.
Like, I hate you. But they must have a point if I have a reaction of I hate you kind of thing.
Well, and
Right.
before you get to addiction as a choice, I mean, why was this mantra or this cliche that addiction is not a choice? Why did that become popular?
Correct.
I-
But you're asking me the questions I was going to
Oh,
ask
okay.
you.
Well,
and that
good.
is exactly
Right.
where we're going to
because
go.
it was to get away from the moralistic shaming side.
Right.
Go ahead, yeah.
It's the bad drug, bad behavior
Mm-hmm.
model of addiction. The drug or the behavior, because we talked about gambling, we talked about shopping addiction. It's drugs and behaviors.
And the social taboos
Social
around them,
ta-
right?
absolutely. Is they jump on top of you. You're walking down the street, and all of a sudden the bad drug or the bad behavior jumps on you, and you go, "Help! Help! It's reefer madness!" You know,
Yes.
one puff, and that's it. You are done. It's getting me. The evil fill in the blank. I should have stayed away. You know, I should have never looked at that porn site. I should have never, gone into that shop. I should have never even taken my first drink when I was 5. Sounds like you did have problems in the family, though, from what you said, your parents.
Well, they've done a ton of research on, and when I will just like to say too, when I see that addiction as a choice, at a certain point, maybe.
But then you can go
But
too
then,
far, right?
like I said, I had, one of the things about denial, you find that a lot, is because denial is a self-protection mechanism. And it keeps you from feeling shame.
Right.
It keeps you from being uncomfortable with the truth.
Right.
Okay?
And it gets
And
back
if
to
you're
that belief
if you're
issue.
comfortable with your story about everything, then you can keep practicing your story.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Until it
It's
smacks
really
you in
nice,
the face.
nicely said, yes.
So,
the
it
story,
is.
the
We
belief.
do. We're human beings. We're meaning-making machines. We make stories. We can't help it. It's how we're wired,
Or
I was
excuses.
very blessed that I didn't have a lot of denial, and so I couldn't have kept it up for 10 years. So, I mean, in that case, it was a blessing.
Okay,
you
I'm
know.
going to go on.
Yeah.
The, one of the things why, like you said, why did we invent this model that addiction was a disease, that you have no control? Political left, which we're pretty much representative of here, loves that model.
Yeah.
It's like it's not their fault.
We're not going to judge them. We're
we
not going to
can't
put them
judge 'em.
down.
The poor fools can't help themselves, And this is all gets mixed up with race and class and, sex and everything, gender. We are not going to put those people down. But it also is very close to the whole Protestant ethic, and I'm not a Protestant, but you're familiar with
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
is the sin and salvation, which is very close to 12-step.
Right.
That it's our country was really founded on the idea of, the sinner needs God for salvation, and one of the things that they make you say, and that's one of the things that this book was really talking about, was if you come in to some treatment places, certainly not all of them, they will say you have to admit you have no control over your addiction. And maybe that's not the best belief to have. Maybe it's better to have a belief that you have control and you're going to lick this dad gum by gosh. And no judge can say that this is in your mind. But
Well,
then
isn't that-
we're getting
yeah.
to the political right,
Right.
which wants this, the miserable sinner saved by religion, And
Well, and even within Protestant circles, I mean, there is that whole debate over free will and choice and also
Almost every circle.
predestination. I mean, that's kind of a debate that exists within all religious traditions in some way or another. But the idea that we're going to either see addicted people as innocent victims or as guilty, sinners and miscreants and rebels and rejects. I mean, really, there's a middle ground in there that I think we don't have to go to one polarized extreme or the other. The fact is, and this kind of feeds back into what Annaflora was saying, we're all sort of addicts, and I think you said something along the same line. We all have our tendencies, our compulsions, our cravings that drive our behaviors, and it's to the extent that they become way out of balance, that's where the problems have developed. But, you know, some people watch a lot of TV. Some people like to watch, you know, participate in sports. They work out. They do things that, you know, in a well-balanced life aren't that big of a deal, but then they become obsessive, and now you've got issues. And when it gets into things that happen to cost a lot of money or take a lot of inordinate amount of time, then those problems start to affect other people. And so we've got to figure out, how do we help people get that adjustment which says, okay, there's a problem, there's an excess here, but it doesn't mean you're a miserable, you know, failure, nor does it mean that you're a passive, helpless, you know, bystander. You are involved in this process and you've got responsibilities.
Absolutely. And I want to remind our viewers that here on February 18th, we're doing a call-in show, and our number is 459-4881. Feel free to call in with a comment, not too long, or a question, which would be even better. But we have a lot of questions right now that we're going to go to. The whole idea of the substance that you can't take one drop of, which can't be food, like we said. It can't be the phone, like we said. You know, and even cigarettes, that you've been able to manage that. You don't have to just stay away. But
I'll get
I have
a lung scan.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Maybe
I
I'm.
have a similar story. You can, if you want to finish your point about what you're talking
what
about.
my point was, it really reminded me about the germ theory. When I was growing up, there was this whole idea that, and I still hear it, that you're walking along down the street and a germ jumps on you. You know, like, oh no! The other day I
flu bug, yeah,
went
right,
into
yeah.
I went to somebody's house, and the young person said, "Oh, don't come in. We have illness in the house." And I said, "I don't care." And they said, "You don't care?" I said, "No, I don't care." You know, that it's not lifestyle, it's not attitude, it's not good deeds, it's not immunity, it's not any of those things. The bug just jumped on you. But some people do have immunities to bug, even Ebola. Some people do, you know, have resistance. When my son was little, I remember him being a toddler sharing an apple with a kid that had pneumonia. I mean, and not getting sick.
Right.
You know, it's just, you're a different person. And it just really hit me. I thought, oh, this is the medical model.
Yeah.
And I think, and we put on labels. Like, I remember being at a party and I saw this girl who was really drunk, and I said, "Do you want to like slow down?" Because I was used to having like a beer for a night. And she said, "Oh, I can't help it. I just have an addictive personality." And
I have to drink.
And
That's
it
a belief
really,
right
it was
there,
a
yeah.
belief that she had no power over her situation, because it was. And I actually came home and asked my mom. I said, "You know, do you think I was born with an addictive personality?" She goes, "We all are, but you have a will to."
And you have support.
And you have support. And that, it was so weird at that party. I really felt like, oh my God, have I been cursed with the addictive personality that I'm just going to end up doing everything because it's just what's going to happen?
Well, you know, it's funny because what happened was you were trying to support her in becoming a more balanced person. What happened instead, she scared you.
Scared me
The
so
infections
much.
go back and forth, right?
That I thought I was
yeah.
going to get the germ theory just because I knew the word
It was going to
addictive personality.
jump on you, right.
Well, and I think this idea of addiction, especially when it comes to controlled substances, you know, the alcohol, the marijuana, the LSD, cocaine, heroin, whatever, you know, amphetamines, you know, that's part of the rationale for criminalizing these things, because if we stop people from trying them in the first place, there will be fewer people addicted. And I think one of the articles you sent my way, you know, preparation for this show, really challenged that idea that there are a lot of people who use these recreational drugs and they go to work the next day and everything's just fine. And
I was thinking of,
you know, I think we have to really rethink that whole aspect of, you know, this, you know, mind-grabbing addiction just kind of pulling us in thrall helplessly.
Right. With the mayor of Toronto, was that the
Yeah, right.
He
He's-
did correct.
Marion Barry?
Right,
You know,
and
but
they're running political campaigns and making big decisions, and
Right.
until the scandal erupts, doing their job somewhat
well, I
effectively.
was thinking
yeah.
of, was that Michael Phelps that it came out that
He was smoking marijuana.
you know, and like, oh my God, it's going to ruin your life. Well, this guy has, what, 9 gold medals?
Right.
It didn't obviously affect his performance.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Could he-
make some
could have had
some
more than that.
observations or speculate that maybe after the Olympic glory has faded, he's a little bit like, now what do I do? You know, so
Well-
maybe because I think he's had some DUIs or some other things that have happened as well. So it's not like he's perfectly functional. I mean,
Yeah, but
part of-
9 gold medals.
well, obviously a fantastic athlete and physical specimen, but there is that kind of life after the glory days have passed, and some of our entertainers, celebrities, athletes really are prone to excess because they've had this high adrenaline existence, and now all of a sudden it's like they're just an ordinary dude, and they're looking for that excitement
I
somewhere.
think this
yeah.
was really close to right after.
It was
Yeah.
really, yeah.
Okay.
And
It wasn't
the
like you-
picture might have been taken before
Yeah.
the Olympics. It was
It wasn't
hard
this
to
Bruce
say.
Jenner thing. It was
Okay.
really
Yeah.
not far
Yeah.
away.
That kind of brings us to what we were talking about, politics.
Yeah.
It's all politics.
And I think about how I was and and people that I've known with alcoholism and very advanced alcoholism. And there's not many other drugs out there that when you get out of rehab, you go out there and you see fluorescent liquor signs everywhere.
Right.
What there is to do when you go out is drink. There's really not places to go out and just have fun and dance that doesn't have it built around drinking. So we've got that's okay, but over here this is not okay. And that comes down to, I think about pot because, I can take it or leave it, and I couldn't take or leave alcohol. I could not do it. I know that, I believe from my experience, not just with alcoholism, but knowing a couple of people that were addicted to heroin. And I believe that your brain changes, and I think that's scientifically supported, that your brain wants more. Whether your conscious mind is what you're trying to use to get yourself
This
straight
brings us
again.
to another model.
Yeah, and I get that, but that's the model that I used. So that's all the information that I have, and I think there's a lot of good information there. I think a lot of times I hear, well, AA is a cult, so let's throw out the baby with the bathwater. But let's take a look and find out what's working about it before we do that, and maybe that then can become parts and pieces of other models. I agree when I came to AA, and the first thing on the block is, I am powerless over alcohol. I thought if I said that word, it's going to be true. I would be declaring it. I resisted the hell out of that idea until a couple relapses came for no good reason. It wasn't like my mother died or I got beat up or, and as soon as I picked up, I was back to the races. So
on the drug
I
you're
get
working
that.
on.
Right. I'm
That's
just sharing what my experience is, and then I've also heard and seen that a person that may have gone to jail for stealing so they could afford their habit. Now they've been in jail, they couldn't get drugs for a year. First day out, they're getting high. And they're right back to the races. It doesn't then slowly, like at first I started and then it slowly got bad. But at that point, it's just bad again now.
But Martha, there are also people who are so addicted to cigarettes they can't have one. And that's not you. People have different tolerances for different drugs.
Sure.
So, but there's been studies, like for instance, one of the studies I read about were when our troops came back from Vietnam, they tested their pee because they were getting out of the army, and lots of them had heroin in their pee. Lots of them had been taking heroin in Vietnam, and they thought we were going to have this huge heroin, amazing, rush of addicts on our streets when the guys came home and the women came home. Didn't happen. You know why it didn't happen? Because they stopped taking.
Well, they were out of that environment. They weren't
were
in the
out.
jungles, in Vietnam. They're back home, and
That's
they've got
right.
their family and
their
their
support.
I mean, they've got to do some
That's
other
right.
kind of regrouping probably to get back to the civilian routine, but
Right.
it's not the same. I need some smack
And
to
they
get through
even
this
they
nightmare.
even
right.
tested them. They even tested the same people, later, as part of a study, and the same people had no heroin in their pee. you know. And I'm not saying that didn't happen to your friend, and we all know people that just can't resist, and they can't. But we do know people who can. So it's
Right.
not one size fits all. That's, you know, what
true.
we're all about.
Right. So,
One of the things that I'm going to go into now is that the model, and I don't know if you've read this because I sent you guys the rat in the cage. The rat's in the cage. There's nothing in the cage. It's just two things he can drink out of. There's water, and there's water with cocaine. Okay, the rat will drink the water with cocaine until he dies. And for 20 years, that study was cited as you can't help yourself. You're going to take cocaine until you die, and then you're going to die, so nobody can ever have this, ever, right? Except if you're in a hospital and they give you a drug that works similarly, and then you get out and you don't take it again. But they did a different study just recently. They put the rat in the cage with the 2 bottles. But this time they put some lady rats in the cage, some toys in the cage, you know, a TV with a lot
rat
of
bachelor pad, basically.
yeah, it was like a man cage. You know, it had, you know, a bunch of TV sets in the
Yeah.
cage, wheels they could run around on in the cage, little baby rats in the cage they could play with, and lots of stuff.
Happy rats.
Okay, those rats, they might have tasted the cocaine water, they didn't drink it till they died, and they didn't drink it at all. And that, and then the people that said, oh, yeah, if you're in a cage and there's nothing else, or like you said in Vietnam, people are shooting at you,
Right.
you might go for that heroin,
Right.
but maybe you don't need to if you're in a different environment, if you're not addicted like crazy like your friend was, or like people.
Or if everybody else around you is doing it, that also affects that whole belief level. And in treatment, I mean, I'm a trainer and I do treatment, and really treatment really is about restructuring belief, and not in a coercive way. It's not like brainwashing or, you know, guilting or shaming. It's just like, let's take a look at the elements of your life, and let's really get down to the core of what do you want to preserve, what do you want to get rid of, what do you want to add, and what do you want to avoid? You know, those 4 things basically. And if we can start to, you know, and you know, you can't just change your beliefs because I'm going to just make it so. You've got to have experience that backs it up. And so as you have those experiences to say, I do have some choices, I do decide where I want to hang out or who I want to be around, then you begin to develop some balance and some healthier habits. Yeah, I think with AA and the idea that you're powerless and that you can't even have one sip of one, you know, half diluted beer, and or else you're, you know, as they say, off to the races. You know, that's a protective hedge, but not everybody needs that. But it does address that belief issue. And if our community says nobody has a sip of a single, you know, drop of wine
That's
or
what
even
they
communion,
said. That's what they said.
Right.
I didn't believe them till I found out.
well, and if that's
And if
That's
that
the
works for
theory,
you,
well,
and if your
That's great.
experience confirm that belief, then I'd say, you know,
But
pursue
I
that. Stay
don't
On that
necessarily-
particular substance,
right? And I
right.
don't necessarily say that each. You know, even in being in AA, there's a group of people who would not normally mix. They're very different people from each other, and their recovery story is different too.
Yeah.
You know, so I know that is true. You know that, and I know there's a person that was really hard up, and he managed to get himself sober. Then he lived with somebody who was drinking a ton, and he's still sober, and he hasn't been going to meetings. So I'm not saying there's only one model.
Right.
I also think, though, that when we talk about politics with drugs, I'm an addict to alcohol, and I see addiction as a choice. And, you know, I almost go, well, then I'm bad and wrong. And I think that that's counterproductive. Whether it's a choice or whether it feels like it's a choice and it's just a feeling, I mean, we're run by, all of us humans are run by ideas that we have.
Sure.
And
Okay.
if it's a choice, it means that our society is not giving us something.
Right.
That we're like you said in the
Yes.
beginning, that we're feeling so obsolete,
Yes.
so failure, that we need to make the choice to not be us.
Yeah.
There are kids getting addicted to heroin because they're stealing mom's pills or the grandmother's
sure.
pills.
That's it.
So there's
That's
many
really
more.
important.
There's other ways to get addicted than just this kid says, oh, let me try this. So a lot of times what I think is education, education, education. As much education as you can get about addiction gives you a better chance of figuring out how to get yourself out of it.
Right.
I know that there's meth as one, and that each of these drugs affects us differently. And I had heard that meth is a really hard one to quit because it basically just makes your own system flood your body with serotonins and all the feel-good chemicals. Now you want to stop, but you have nothing left.
Right.
You have permanently damaged your own emotional equilibrium, which if we're coming
choice
from
for a while.
ideas, if we're coming from ideas and beliefs, you know that that's an area that's going to really affect our ideas and our beliefs.
Absolutely. It's a choice for a while, and after a while, sometimes it's not a choice.
I read an article by a guy who spent like 5 years of his life homeless, and he said he had never done drugs ever before he ended up homeless by these weird circumstances. And he said he felt more and more drawn to drugs every day because he was so bored. When you're homeless, he had nowhere to live, he was cold, he had nothing to do all day. So he said, if I had drugs, it would be something to do. It's like something to, set my day up for. And I thought that was interesting. It's your idea of if you give someone a really nice environment and they have the other rats and the TV and they won't need the drugs as much.
I've read that about homelessness also,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that certainly in Utah where they have the housing first model, where they put homeless people into houses.
Yep.
They don't try to get them off drugs.
Yep.
A lot of them go off drugs because they have a better cage. They
And
have
that's
a better
something worth working
Yeah.
for and preserving. And I think that's back to the politics model. I mean, we've just had this incarceration, oppression thing going, and
Sure.
that's the war on drugs. And I think that's where we are as a society.
Yeah.
At least there's a critical mass of people saying, can we come up with something a little bit more intelligent than this?
Certainly,
Please,
we've been
you know?
dumping a ton of money on a war on drugs.
Oh,
Yeah, which is a
billions.
war
So
on
you're talking
people.
about
Right, well, right,
well,
right.
and not only that, but the obvious thing is, well, the police go and now they're going to confiscate their property, and the police keep the money.
Well, there's
It doesn't go
definitely an
into
industry.
treatment. It doesn't go into not just treatment, but it doesn't go into research or anything like if it were. They say it's a disease model, then live up to that, for
Right.
God's sakes. But another part that I see as very political is when we can blame the addict, then we can also knock him out of the game.
Well, we can make
don't
money
have
off
so
of
much.
Well, you
we
can
don't.
make
Well,
money off
you
it.
not only
Tons
that,
of
but
money off it.
there's not room enough for everybody to have a decent job. So if we
There
can,
would be.
if we
Oh,
can put him
yeah.
in prison,
can
then
make money off
somebody
people in
has a
prison.
decent job, but it's not that guy.
Well, I think
It's the guy that
Well, that brings us to Portugal. That what they're doing in Portugal, they legalized all the drugs, legalized everything, which is,
I have not heard that.
in Portugal, they legalized everything, and they took all the money that they were spending on the drug war, and they put it into treatment and finding people housing and getting people into jobs and all
I think
that
they
stuff.
part more like decriminalize. It's not like you can just go there and just buy whatever you want. I mean, I think
Oh, it's
by-
just not a
It's
crim-
decriminalized.
that's
What legalized
better
means
said.
it's an open market, and you can just go down to the street
It's
corner.
Colorado.
But it's like a $25 fine if you're caught with
Well,
it or
right,
something.
right, and you've got some community
But they're
service, some
not-
things you've got to do, but it's
Right.
not going to be off to penitentiary with the with the
In
hard time and
shackles,
all
yeah.
that, right? And I think again, and so I've done some of those studies as well, where the addiction rate goes down, certainly the
it's cheaper.
violent crime and the crime gangs go down because there's just not that same kind of high stakes cat and mouse game where violent gangs are becoming extremely rich because of the war on drugs. They have the controlled substances. They know how to exploit the demand, and it becomes this, really destructive and hopeless downward spiral. But law enforcement makes money off it. The prison system makes money off it, and I think you can say that there's even ways of keeping society segregated or downtrodden.
down.
Certainly, people are
dumb
exploited
18-year-old.
because of that.
Dumb
Right,
18-year-old loses his head, goes hits somebody, goes to jail, spends a couple years there, comes out. Now he can't get a job.
Right.
But you know what? You can get a job selling dope.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of like it really is
It's a crime school.
It is. It's a social separation, and it is not at all about recovery.
Right.
Well, not only that, but our drug laws were made for certain to keep racial groups down, like the opium laws
Yeah.
were made to keep the Chinese down. You know, we had the Chinese Exclusion Act was the first Immigration Act where we don't want these people. We're going to criminalize their drugs. We're going to scare you
Yeah.
about their drugs.
Whereas from Europe, just come on over, cheap
Right,
labor,
right,
come
that's
on
right.
in, you know.
And then, you know, then you got marijuana, that horrible, you know, Latin funny name, which we didn't call hemp. That's rope, you know. And, you know, we're going
It's been called a lot of things.
but that's you know, that's aimed at those crazy people from Mexico, you know. And then there's a drug to criminalize every downtrodden group, and now we've got the new Jim Crow, of course,
Yeah.
Of crack.
of crack, right? And then we've got in meth, because you don't want any poor white people like
Yeah,
you know
but-
being uppity either, you know. And that every group has their criminalization.
Well, and I think also, you know, there's politicians who exploit that resentment, that revenge, you know, tough on crime, lock them up, throw away the key, 3 strikes, you're out.
Yeah, vote
there-
for me.
And there's a certain portion of our populace that kind of just wants to throw the book at these losers, and it is based on sort of class and other types of discrimination.
Seeing it as a
and
moral issue
It's a moral issue, definitely.
instead of
Right.
a physical
Yeah,
issue.
but not a moral issue in the sense that,
Or
hey, these people
psychological.
need help. It's like, let's just lock their ass up and get them out of our life so we don't have to worry about, you know, walking around them when we're going down shopping in the suburbs or whatever. So, you know, there is that
Right.
more, I guess I'm sounding a bit cynical here, but I do see that playing itself out in our politics, that there are just certain classes or types of people that we just as soon lock up and put away and not have to be bothered with. And I think
Absolutely.
the drug war has been a big facilitator of that, and it's really, you know, brought very severe damage into a lot of people's lives. And I feel bad for the young people who get caught up in drug dealing, whether it's on the street corner or in a more organized sense. They're doing things that maybe help in the short term for survival, but they really are shooting themselves in the foot, you know, sometimes literally, but more figuratively. You're playing a very dangerous game that's really going to backfire in the long run when you get to that, when your brain develops to adult maturity and you say, I gotta be legit here, but the odds are really against you. You know?
Right. Well, that brings us to this book. And I also want to, if anyone wants to call in, our number is 459-4881. This is Surviving America's Depression Epidemic, because
Yeah.
depression and unhappiness really gives way to being more prey to trying drugs to suppress. The depression is one way to suppress the pain that you're feeling, but so is taking a substance, a way
Sure.
to depress the pain that you're feeling. And this is a really good book too. The psychiatrist or psychologist who wrote this said that in past eras, 40 years ago, the onset of depression was typically like 30 years old and was probably a housewife. And she, you know, her cage was not fun,
Right.
you know, and she was getting depressed and going on little pills. That's what
Mother's
was,
little helper, right?
yeah, Judy Garland kind of thing. But now the onset of depression is more like 14,
Yeah.
and it's very typically that way, and which is
Yeah.
what we see in young people more and more. And the thing is, while we're being really unhappy and addicted and concentrating on everybody's mental health, we're not addressing what makes society so bad that everybody's so demoralized.
Right.
Well, and it said, I have a ton of friends that are on antidepressants, and we're changing our bodies, but we're not changing the outside world. Like, we're
Right.
all medicating us and not saying,
That's right.
why?
There's your laugh.
Why are we on medication
Yeah.
when this is crappy?
Right. I mean,
My
you know,
mother's in a nursing home, and she had some anxiety, she said, about getting into the car and going to the doctor. And they right away offered her anti-anxiety
your
medication.
Xanax,
And she's
right.
like, I don't want medication. I just want to figure out this problem.
But
You
there's
know?
a commercial
I thought that was
angle in
awesome.
this. I mean,
Yeah.
let's get them
Someone's
on the
making money.
Prozac, the
Yeah.
Xanax,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the patent medicines,
Sure.
and there's billions of dollars in
And that used to
dispensing
be
that,
against
yeah.
the law,
I know.
too.
Well, now we advertise on TV. You can't watch the evening news without
Tell your
getting.
doctor, you need this, right? You
Right.
watch the evening news, you go, oy
Oh my God, I need
vey.
it all.
Right.
You know, we're gonna like, bomb Ukraine in 10
Yeah,
minutes. You know,
but
and-
the big pharma lobbyists paid Congress to say, let us advertise this on TV, and so, quid pro quo, except it's not legally quid pro
Right.
quo, I guess. So, but that's just just such an interesting contrast, because now that you've got middle class, suburban, or affluent people struggling with their opiate addictions, all of a sudden, there's a sensitivity, and we've got to be patient and careful. Whereas it used to be lock them up in the slammer, those junkies,
yeah,
those
if it's
losers.
crack, we
Yeah,
don't care.
right.
If it's cocaine, well, it's a little more high class. right?
Exactly. Or if it's prescription pills and we're addicted, you poor thing. Well, and I don't want to sound like I lack empathy, because those can be very difficult.
They're very difficult.
Very.
Extremely.
And somebody mentioned that people get addicted because they're in mom's pills when they're
Right.
really young, and prescription addictions are just terrible.
Oh, and they're skyrocketing because they're
Terrible.
pure, they're commercially acceptable. It's kind of like what you're talking about with alcohol. There's neon signs
Neon
in the
signs.
bars.
People I'm starting
and
them so
Dr.
young.
Feelgood.
I know people that
Dr.
start them at
Feelgood.
10
Oh,
for
right.
antidepressants,
Believe
and it's
me,
like,
yeah.
I mean,
Dogs.
we have an idea in our heads in this culture of what kind of people are addicts. When you say the word addict, what is that? What's the picture that shows up in your brain? Because we
Yeah.
picture things a lot.
Strung out.
I mean, I saw when I was in rehab, a woman came through and she had started out with a surgery, and she was somebody's grandma. She's this
Yeah.
old lady, and she takes these pain pills. Innocent as hell, right? Until after a while, she's supposed to be over it.
Maybe
Now
3
she's
of those,
doctor
right?
shopping and doing, without anybody ever training her how
Right,
this is done.
right.
They're doing the traditional behaviors. So, it's not uncommon,
Yeah.
and there are more than one way to find yourself in trouble. So as soon as we've got, it's easy to throw
one way to
some
find
guy
it.
that
Yeah.
not paying his
Well
child
said.
support in jail because he's doing drugs. But it's a little harder to throw grandma in jail because
I
she's
also
now
think
an
that-
opiate addict.
Yeah.
Go ahead, on.
I also
ahead.
think that we're doing extreme behavior modification. I have a lot of friends who are in school and they can't focus on their classes, so they're taking tons of Adderall and upping the doses.
Yeah.
And in other generations, they might have said, okay, I'm in business classes and I'm taking tons of Adderall, or I'm feeling like I can't focus. Maybe I should change my major to pottery, something that I love to do
Or
for
go
hours.
down on my hours.
Or go down to my
yeah.
hours. But now that we're so much like we have to fit in the round, we're the square box fitting the round hole.
Right.
We just become the addict to kind of work with the system.
Right, and that gets me right where I started with, that we're not the agents of our own lives. We're taking somebody else's version of us often and saying, how do I fit into that? And whether it's a judge saying, you have to go to treatment, you have to do this. I read about these boys that were caught, they were caught smuggling drugs in from Jamaica. They were sentenced to all these treatment programs. They weren't addicts, they were just doing it for money.
Right.
They said, we needed money. So, we're selling drugs. And the judge didn't believe them. Because or a girl who wanted to go to the drug-free high school, but she wouldn't say, I have no power over my addiction, so they wouldn't let her go there. And she said,
She has no power over her schooling, basically.
Yeah, and she said, I can't go back to that school because I'm going to take drugs if I'm in that environment. I knew a guy when I lived in Alaska, in Barrow. I lived in this tiny little town in Barrow, Alaska, because it was the one place he couldn't get heroin. And he was completely fine. His wife lived there, and he had a couple kids, and he went to work every day. He was really happy.
It's a geographic cure.
It was a
We
geographic
speak
cure.
about that.
But I wanted to talk
But
about
everywhere you
addiction
go, there you are.
because I really feel that our being told what we are and what we should be doing, and how we can't face how we're not fitting into these pictures that we're being given is driving addiction. which is driving the drug wars, which is driving us not dealing with the problems in Congress or the problems in the schools or the peace community. And it all comes down to making us believe that somehow we're not okay.
We gotta make it.
We gotta make it.
We gotta win, even if it means taking tons of drugs.
Damn it.
or-
It's that we have no choice. Granted, there's something, if you see you have no choice of something, do whatever you have to do. But I believe sometimes addictions can be good. I know people that are addicted to writing. They write every night. They've written novels. They've written poetry. People get addicted to their
motivated?
honeys.
I think we're kind of wrapping up. I think they're giving us those time
I am
cues,
wrapping
so,
up.
okay,
I know
very
exactly
good.
what's happening
But
in the
yeah,
studio.
well, thank you for inviting me to this conversation. It's very
Well,
thought-provoking.
thank you for
Yeah.
having, and thank you for your sincerity
Yeah, definitely.
about
Well,
your
definitely.
life and about what's going on with young people. And again,
Especially.
if we take our agency back and say we are who we are, not how you define us,
And it doesn't matter if we make it.
doesn't matter if we make your version of us, that we
That's right.
will make our cages better. We will make everything better.
It'd be nice to live cage-free.
Cage free.
You know, and I mean, that would take a very large political shift.
I'm gonna. I
We'll
wanna
do our part.
Thank you, panel, and thank you, audience. And I have to say, I knew a guy that was an alcohol addicted, and he lived in a trailer park with his mom. And I saw him the other day, and he's got a writing gig, and he's really happy. He's doing his
Cool.
politics.
Right on.
I said, "Well, don't spend your money on alcohol." He said, "Oh, I don't drink anymore. I'm spending my money on activism."
Right on.
And it was so nice.
Oh, that's cool.
you know,
That's a
because
great
Success
He
story.
got out of his cage.
He got a better cage.
You got a better cage.
And he's going to make our cage better. He's going to start doing more protesting and start doing more stuff.